It's hard to see with a naked eye. You see something, but it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. It's hard to explain. We went into looking at incidents with prosaic explanations, trying to say, okay, this is more than likely something that is just being misidentified. The problem is, and this is why the 5 observables were so helpful, because once you lay that data over the 5 observables and they start fitting into those categories, now you've got something that is outside the normal
Yes.
parameters of something conventional.
Can you define the 5 observables for people?
Yeah, sure. The first one is, do you want me to go into a little detail of each
Please,
as well?
yes.
Okay, so the first observable is instantaneous acceleration. So what is instantaneous acceleration? Well, acceleration is a change in velocity. So if I'm driving 50 miles an hour and I kick up the gas to 100 miles an hour, I am changing my velocity. How quickly I achieve that speed, there are inertial forces that are experienced. And we call those forces, we equate to them on a scale called a G-force. 1G is the effect of Earth's gravity on us, 9.8 meters per second squared. Because of the mass of the Earth, we all experience gravity relatively equal. And so if in comparison, if I do a high G maneuver in a combat aircraft, that's about up to a 9G, which is a lot, like 9 times the force of gravity. So now your head goes from being 14 pounds to now, almost 100 pounds plus, right? So that's your whole body. So now you weigh over 1,000 pounds when you're pulling these maneuvers. So we wear G suits to negate that effect. And the human being can withstand about 9 G forces for a short period of time before you start having medical consequences and ultimately death, right? You have blackouts and redouts and you die. To compare that to our technology, we have one of our most highly maneuverable manned aircraft. It's an old aircraft, but it's still one of the most highly maneuverable, is the General Dynamics F-16. The F-16 at the unclassified level can pull about 17 Gs before you start having structural failure, meaning wings begin to snap off. And that's the F-16 right there, right? The Falcon. Yep. Highly maneuverable. Now, we have other vehicles that are unmanned that can, perform much more than that, but that's pretty much the limitations of a manned vehicle.
Okay.
What we are seeing are objects that are performing at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 G-forces, right? So well beyond the healthy limitations of anything biological to withstand, and certainly well beyond anything from a material science perspective. So that's observable 1. The second observable is hypersonic velocity. Now, what is hypersonic velocity? It is technically 5 times the speed of sound. So speed of sound, Mach 1, is roughly 760 some miles an hour at sea level. So you're booking, right? Yeah. Multiply that by 5, and you're going to put that in comparison. An average commercial jet flies about 550 miles an hour if you're lucky with with a good tailwind. Now, do we have aircraft that can do that? We do. We have, for example, the Lockheed YF-12A SR-71, aka the Blackbird. It can fly about Mach 5.
Ooh.
You can, but when it wants to do a right-hand turn, it takes roughly half the state of Ohio to do it, right? These things are not flying at 3,200 X miles an hour. Some of these UAP are flying at 10,000, 13,000 miles an hour. And they're doing it in a low Earth atmosphere environment where the friction coefficient is really, really high. And they're not taking a slow, steady turn. They're doing instant 180s, 90-degree turns. So you have to scratch your head and say, well, who has that technology, right? So the third observable, it's a bit of an oxymoron. It's low observability, meaning it's hard to see with a naked eye. You see something, but it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. It's hard to explain. Even on radar data, it's coming back. The radar is suggesting there's some sort of jamming potentially going on, or some sort of spoofing going on the radar systems. And then the fourth, and by the way, do we have low observability? Yeah, we do. We've got aircraft that are super sleek and they're hard to see. We have stealth bombers, right? Like the B-2 bomber and the Valkyrie that we have to lower the cross section just a little bit so we can sneak in under the radar. These things are different. We're not talking about stealth technology. We're talking about something fundamentally different. And then the fourth observable is something called transmedium travel.
Yes.
Forgive me. So what is transmedium travel? It is the ability to operate in multiple domains. What's a domain? It's an environment. So we are seeing these things operating in lower atmosphere, underwater, in the air. Do we have transmedium technology? We do. Look, we've had them for decades. Look at a seaplane. Perfect example. A seaplane can fly in the air and it can float on the water. But let's face it, a seaplane is neither a really good plane or a really good boat because it's a compromise. And so the more environments you want to compromise and perform in, the more of a sacrifice there is to performance and design. It's the reason why the space shuttle came in and glided down like a brick. It wasn't a very good plane because it was compromised because it spent a lot of its time up in space. So it's hard to make it's the reason why a submarine looks like a submarine and a jet looks like a jet, because they spend most of their time in that one environment. Right? If you want an object to operate in multiple environments, there's more sacrifices to your design and your performance capabilities. That's just the way it is. We're not seeing that with these UAP. They are able, without having to change their performance or their design, they can operate seemingly and seamlessly both in air and underwater and possibly even outer space. So we're talking about something that's really beyond what we currently have in our inventory. And then the last observable, which is a terrible word in the science community, which is anti-gravity.
Yeah.
But it's not anti-gravity in the literal sense. It's simply the ability to defy the effects of Earth's gravity without the associated technologies. So we talked a bit earlier about flight, right, with wings.
Yes.
So there's really only 3 ways we know how to fly right now and how we can defy Earth's gravity. One is through flight itself. We just talked about that. The other way is through buoyancy. So think of a hot air balloon. Think of a helium balloon where you have a cavity, and inside that cavity it's less dense than outside, and so it will rise till it reaches its equilibrium, right? That's how hot air balloons work and mylar balloons and things like that. And then the other way is simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Put enough energy behind something and it will go. It's called ballistics, right? Think of an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, where you put enough thrust behind it and you can have it literally counter the effects of Earth's gravity. Same thing as a baseball. Take a baseball, throw it in the air. That is ballistic, if you will. Energy. You're putting energy into something. Newton's law of gravity: for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction, and it goes and it moves for a little while. We're not seeing that. These things don't have any obvious signs of lift. They don't have any obvious signs of propulsion. They don't seem to have a cavity in there for buoyancy. And yet somehow they are able to defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. So now when you have an object that you've detected on radar, that you have electro-optical data that the pilots are reporting, and they're fitting into these categories, right? Now you realize, okay, this isn't a drone. This isn't a quadcopter. This isn't a balloon. This isn't, you're dealing with a fundamentally different type of technology. And that's when ATIP really gets involved. That's when it's like, okay, we're dealing with something. I mean, could it be a Red Force technology? It might, but if it is, we're in a lot of trouble, because we've been seeing these things for a very long time over our controlled U.S. airspace, over our sensitive military installations. And so it's obviously, from that perspective, it is a national security issue, for sure, 100%.
Yeah. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.